Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again so soon. So what are we talking about today? Charles and I are going to be covering doing the right stuff with analytics. Not necessarily the geeky stuff, the nerdy stuff that we normally present, but in a similar way to yesterday, this is about reverse engineering and thinking about the concepts and the strategies that you need to get in place. But there's a very good quote here from SoftBank, who are running a small fund, right, shall we say. And the interesting thing that this guy talks about is that all of the companies that they invest in, one of the first questions they ask him is, what data have you got? Who looks after it? Where do you store it? Where do you process it? What's the intellectual property that you have within your data? And what are you doing with machine learning? And if you don't have any answers to those questions, then SoftBank's probably not interested in investing in you. So there needs to be a data story, and there is with almost every one of those companies that they actually invest in. So that's a clue to today. And I would like to introduce my fellow presenter, Charles Meaden.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Good morning, Charles. And the two of us today have a lot of history in this. Can anyone tell me what this is? Who said that? Log file. Yeah, it is. It's an HTTP log file. This is what analytics was like back in 1999. So between the two of us, we've been working on this for 40 years. You know, nearly 500 analytics setups and lots of mistakes. We have worked on lots of failed projects that didn't go right, but those mistakes are good. We've learned from them. Failure is part of analytics work, and our pain is going to be your gain today. And one of the things that we were asked to do is we didn't want to make this highly specific about Google Analytics. All the stuff we're talking about today will work with any analytics package. It's about the concepts behind this stuff. So today is really an action list for you. If you do not have these things that we talk about today as part of your analytics strategy or your general IT strategy, then you need to go back to your office and make sure this stuff is added, right? Because it's not just about having cool analytics, it's also about competitive advantage and employee productivity. People being able to do their jobs better will also make them happier, and it will make you happier if you're owning or managing those, owning that company or managing those people.
Can I do this one?
Yes.
Right. We're not Spotify, we're not Zalando. We haven't got any data to show you because we are very, very careful about our clients' data. But what we're going to show you is the concepts that we used with these clients.
So these are the things that we're going to cover today. And it's kind of looking at through the lens of the type of problems that you actually need to solve fundamentally within your data architecture or the data layer within your business. Data layer is a bit like plumbing. It's wired in everywhere in your business, and it's actually an important asset. It's a leverageable asset in its own right. And we're going to be covering all of these things today. So let's get started. One of the first problems that I alluded to yesterday was all about data collection. You know, if you get this bit wrong, it's sort of polluting everywhere else. And this quote from Simo really sums it up. It's the one place in the analytics life cycle where if you get it wrong, it screws everywhere else. And that's a big problem because a lot of companies have broken analytics. They haven't audited them, or they have audited them, but they've introduced problems later on. So when we did this analysis that I showed you yesterday, we found 95% of the site audits that we do identify fundamental data collection and configuration issues. So basically 95% of our clients that we engaged had really badly broken analytics, and less than 1% of those actually had solid, reliable, clean data that they could trust to run their business off. And that's kind of terrifying for me because I don't really want this to be the situation. And wiring up your analytics correctly to your business signals is what all this game is about. And you wouldn't do an out-of-the-box solution for this type of stuff, Oh, we'll just take the stock management software or the nuclear power station management software, and we'll just accept all the defaults, and it will run fine. Life is not like that. And even free tools like Google Analytics are not free of effort. People say to me, but Google Analytics is free. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you don't have to do any work. It just means you get a basic system, right? When a manager says to you, oh, but Google Analytics is free, yeah, well, that means that we should spend some money on actually extending it and enhancing it. It doesn't mean it runs for free. And just like your car, if you run your car and you don't put any oil in it or you don't do any maintenance, it will eventually just blow up, right? And it doesn't run on air, and neither does analytics. It needs an investment. This is the #1 weakness in our clients. It's the #1 problem that we would really like them to address, because it affects all of their A/B testing. If you have bad analytics, you'll probably have rubbish data in your A/B testing. You'll have rubbish data in your dashboards. So solving this is part of solving the entire problem. And you can't compete against other companies if your dashboard is not showing the right speed or the right telemetry data being fed back to you. How can your team do their jobs if they can't measure too? And it would be like if you just went and bought some knockoff tills for John Lewis from some guy who had a bunch of them in a skip, and then you went and put those tills inside a department store. If I had 20 mixed tills in John Lewis, how would my management and reporting systems look? Like a dog's breakfast. Knackered tills, crap data, and then you get this flow of BS through your whole organization, all the way from the collection layer. Bullshit. So you need to get this stuff nailed. Over 50%, I was talking with Simo Ahava about this the other day, over 50% of the Google Analytics setups that are running out there are just the plain vanilla tag. No extra customization, no extension of it. It's just out of the box. And you could say that's a bad thing, but it's also an opportunity. It means half the Google Analytics world has got extra room for improvement. If you're in that club, this stuff will help you today. But you see, if you screw up collection, you need a time machine to go back and fix it. There is no existential pain worse than realizing your last 6 months of data is broken and you'll never be able to do anything about it. So either the problems exist right now, in which case an audit will pick them up, or you put them in, you break it next week, right? In which case you need a proper process for releasing this stuff. So if you do analytics, always have a test setup as well as a live setup. So when your developers are implementing analytics changes or putting stuff live or new funnel tracking, you validate that the stuff works first before putting it live. You don't just put code live on your website and say, oh, customers will call us up if it's broken. It's cool, ship it, right? That doesn't work. So you need to have a similar situation to mitigate that risk with analytics. And you need to invest in automation. If you're asking people to put tracking links in everything that they do, give them a ruddy tracking system that they can type in and it will give them a link, right? Because otherwise, you know what happens. People will make their own link strategy up and then all your data is messed up. So, if you invest directly into supporting data collection as part of your project outcomes, then you will get much better measurable data. The feel the fear, do it anyway, measure the results thing doesn't really work if you don't measure the results, and you can't do it. So for data collection, get yourself audited. I know people that do Adobe and Google Analytics and other analytics packages. Get a test and live set up, and then make sure that you provide tracking support for all stories and tasks that are going through your product. And you need to test any analytics changes before you push them live, because you won't fix them later. And you need some sign-off process where somebody says, yes, those tracking tags are implemented correctly. So Seymour talks about agile integration. Don't do a bolt-on. Data is part of everything, like the guy from SoftBank says. There you go.
Thank you, Craig. Right, data skew is something that we see, I would say, Craig, in every single audit we've ever done.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, every single audit picks
Every
this
single
one up.
audit we've ever done.
You all have this.
What is data skew? It's where your data's correct, but it needs to be cleaned and untangled. Just like the Christmas tree lights. Every Christmas you have to get out of a box, and what's it, half an hour, to get the things working. Now the time taken to clean that data is time you don't have to spend to analyze. And most importantly, people start to lose trust in the data. Now you might know the data's correct. Other people look at it and go, that's a load of rubbish. I no longer trust this. And we've been into so many organizations and we say, why don't you look at the analytics data? Oh, it doesn't work, does it? I'll use the sales order system, I'll use the account system instead. So, we have a couple of sanity checks that we put in when we're looking at data. Does the data make sense to me? Quick show of hands here. How many people have ever looked at a data set and go, I have no idea what this means? That's a good show of hands. Okay. Does it make sense to somebody else? Too often we've seen naming conventions that make perfect sense to the analyst. Somebody else looks at it and goes, I genuinely have no idea what it's talking about. And that person then leaves. How clean, and this touches on the data collection that Craig talked about, how clean is the whole data collection and processing stream? And most importantly, how much work am I going to have to do to fix this before I can even start analyzing the data? And as we go through, we've got a couple of examples here. So, does your data look like this piece of toffee? Fragmented into tens, hundreds of thousands of pieces that we're going to have to stitch together before we can even start working on it. And the most common one we do is what we call too many URLs. Because our website has only got one homepage, but our analytics system says, no, you've got 300, because somebody's popped a tracking URL or a query string on the end and left it for 2 years. And it's a problem because one of us has got to go back and deal with that before we can report on it. And these are some other common sources of data skew that we see. Somebody didn't track the cross-domain or the subdomains. Payment gateways, campaign tracking misconfigured. I think we had a client that had 12 different ways to spell affiliate. Yeah, we've all been there. And also, upper and lower cases. Nothing I like more than when I'm trying to analyze search intent where somebody didn't bother to do an upper and lower case. It's fixable, it's just more time. So I'm going to give you an example. Sorry, we're going to have to do a Google Analytics thing here. So Google Analytics only shows you the top 50,000 items per table. Everything else goes into a bucket called other. Now, a client came to us and said, we've got a bit of a problem. 46% of all our URLs are disappearing into the other bucket. So they had 3 questions for us. They said, are we actually recording everything? Because they didn't have the expertise in-house to know how to delve into the other bucket. Are we recording too much data? And then how do we record just what we need? So using the API, we pulled out a couple of million different variations. And it turned out they had 111 different query strings that might have appeared in the URLs at any one time. And what had happened is they had put on a standard analytics tag and just captured absolutely everything. So what do? We sat down with the client. He said, you've got 2 choices. Which of the query strings are actually useful for analyzing user behavior, and which have no analytical value at all? And what we did is we built 150 filters to essentially clean and remove all the query strings that had no value at all. And then what we did is we said, where possible, let's pass that data into a data layer rather than place it on the URL. So the end result is they've ended up with a really clean and usable, and it's key. They actually came back and said, actually, we have confidence back in our analytics system because it makes more sense now without that page fragmentation. So in summary, a couple of things. Do the page names and events actually make sense to you and somebody else? Are you capturing data that you don't actually need? Does your analytics match up with your other systems? This is a really common thing that we see is, why am I recording more sales in my sales system than in my analytics system? How do you build groupings? How many views are there in your data? We've been into clients, and there's 27 Google Analytics views that nobody ever deletes because nobody knows who owns them. I'm going to go, when was the last time you actually audited your analytics? And test every single change that we make. We had a client last week where they hadn't tested one filter, and it ruined 6 months' worth of data.
Uh-oh.
Over to you, Craig.
Thank you, sir. And data pollution is another one that we come across very regularly during audits. But I need to define this for you. Let's give you a little definition of data pollution versus skew. So data pollution is your data contains extra stuff that shouldn't actually be in there. It's crap. And a third party is adding the data. It could be bots, it could be spam, or you've actually done something wrong that's causing extra data to be in there that shouldn't be in there. And this is an interesting one. This is a conceptual model from a client that came to us and they said, help, our conversion rate is dropping. And true enough, the conversion rate had been going down and down and down and down. And we went back to them and they thought we were going to ask them a technical question. But we said to them, how many people do you have working in the Philippines? How many have you hired in the last year? And how many are you going to hire over the next year? And they were like, we thought this was an analytics audit, not a staffing review. And we said, bear with us, bear with us. The problem here is that this is their data pool, right? But inside their analytics data, they've got customers who are logging in and using the back-end system, but also their internal staff, and then the huge outsourced company that they've set up in the Philippines to do all the work for these clients, all the staff that they're hiring in there, they're growing it massively. So they've gone from like 5 staff to 200 staff within a year, and it's going to end up being 400 staff and then 600 staff. But the problem is all of these people log in and use the same front door as the customers and prospects. So it'd be like if you were standing with a clicker outside a department store recording all the customers coming in, what happens if the employees are using the same entrance or delivery people? Well, then your data's skewed. You're not counting customers. And this was the whole problem. Their conversion rate, if they kept on employing more and more people in the Philippines, would eventually drop to 0 because none of their internal staff ever buy the product. And this causes a massive problem because when you try an A/B test against this data, you've got all these different customer statuses mixed, right? And people, it's not customers.
Should we mention, Craig, how simple the fix was? We said to them, oh, how long is this going to take to fix? We said, well, do you have any customers in the Philippines? They went, no. We said, fine. We'll filter out the Philippines traffic.
Bang! And this is what they really wanted. The bot, spam, and automated traffic completely filtered out. One universe for customers that are in trial and paid. One view of prospects. All the dev and staging work, not in any of our live data. And then all the internal partner and Philippine stuff in its own view, right? And it seems really simple, but all this stuff was mixed together in a random pot to begin with, which is why all of their headline stats, and their solution to this was to throw more money at it. They'd been spending like crazy, and the conversion rate was still dropping. Can you imagine the panic that had set in? So here's a company who is making really bad business decisions, losing money and panicking because their data isn't right. That's the problem. And these are the common pollution sources, and you probably have at least one, maybe 2 of these still existing in there, unless you've checked, of course. So your agency does stuff in your website, your developers do, your partners, employees, contractors. You have different offices and people looking at your homepage. Shouldn't be in there. It's for customer data. Then there's bots and automated services. Another one is site performance tools. You know those ones that check how fast your site is loading? And of course, they come every minute or 2 minutes and check the loading time, but that's adding crap into your analytics data. The site performance monitoring thing never buys anything. Then you have developers doing internal testing or running their own monitoring tools. That was when we found about 60% of someone's traffic in their site. Oh yeah, we set up this box that just like goes through different user journeys every day randomly and checks different stuff and products. And it took us ages to figure out what it was, but they were doing it to themselves.
The thing was, there was no common pattern.
No.
Apart from, we narrowed it down to the fact they were all on Linux desktops. That was a bit of a giveaway.
That was a bit of a giveaway. No one on Linux was buying that much in the site. But it could also be misconfigured tags or having duplicate, double firing tags on the page. So these are all the common kind of sources of that stuff. The thing is that it can be very subtle. Either you know, either you really notice it and you think there's something wrong here, but it could be a subtlety. It could even be like the Philippines, where you convince yourself you've got another problem and you try and address it. So external or internal bias can screw your data hygiene, and it really hits trust. People just stop believing it. And all your key site metrics, conversion rate, bounce, everything else will get hosed by this data. So if you're looking at those key metrics in your dashboards, some bullshit is flowing up into those figures. So filter out this stuff so that you only permit what you explicitly count as real customer traffic, and everything else should be filtered. Charles.
Thank you, Craig. Right, now, we've just talked about, what, 3 really negative things and how things could go wrong. So it's time to do the positive stuff. So I want to touch on data enrichment. And as Craig pointed out yesterday, is there such a thing as plug-and-play analytics? Can we just put a tag on the site and walk away? No. If you really want to get an analytics system that's going to work for you, you need to be enriching this to make it more powerful. And I'm going to just go back on Craig's quote again. Data quality isn't acquired. You have to earn this stuff. Now, the fundamental problem is that some of the out-of-the-box analytics definitions are simply flawed because they are a one-size-fits-all model. And actually what you need to do is you need to tune your analytics system so it fits how your business, product, or service actually works. And then you're going to get a far better idea of actually how are your users, visitors, or whatever we're going to call them today, people are using the site. So we need to customize, we need to tweak, and we need to enhance the standard analytics configuration that goes on your site. In the end, you'll end up with a really, really rich set of data. And a lot of our customers say, what am I going to do with all this data? I say, possibly nothing today, but in 3, 6, or a year's time, you're going to be so glad that you had that data. And time again, we've had clients have come back and say, can you tell us how many people clicked on the faceted search? And we go, brilliant, because we've been capturing that for the last year for you. So, question for all of you is, what can you do to capture the most important interactions and events as part of the user journey? So I'm going to tell you a sad story now. It's about a story about data going missing. So we had a client in the travel sector who was capturing all this useful information, where people were flying from, departure dates. They were doing it in the query strings. Now, I know I've just talked about data skew and it being a bad thing, but these guys have built a model, they extracted it, they got all the stuff. And the powers to be said, right, we need a new site. And do you think the developers actually bothered to talk to the analytics team? No. They thought, we'll just put the tag back on and it will work. And lo and behold, the analytics came in to find, oh, the query strings have gone. We have clean URLs now, and we've put your Google Analytics tag back on. All that useful data had just all of a sudden was no longer being recorded. Yep. You can imagine the Slack chats that would go backwards and forwards at that point. The blame thrower was definitely out that day. So they called us in, and we said, right, we're going to create a plan to explicitly review all the data that's required and identify which stuff is useful and which stuff you don't need. We then made sure that all the important signals were put back in, and we didn't say go back to the query string. We said let's go back and do this properly. Now, because it's GA360, we use custom dimensions and we used events. If it was Adobe, we'd be using evars, props, and events. Now, sorry, this isn't a advertisement for GA360, but because they had it, they could put up to 200, and I think we're up to 120 now. So we said basically capture every single thing that you think going forward you're going to want to use to analyze the journey. So where you're coming, where you're flying from, dates of travel, size of group, how many hotels did somebody view through the journey? Yep. Did they use a search? Did they get a quote? I particularly like the availability for each hotel. How scarce was that hotel in a consideration set for whether somebody made the purchase or not? Now, this is a question we always ask people. In your analytics system, can you actually identify who a customer is when they come back to the site? And they'll sometimes say, yes, somebody who's bought something in our system. Well, that's fine. That's additional work. Do you have a flag in your system that says this person is a customer? And this is a model that we've built for a subscription site. And so you essentially have 3 groups. As Craig says earlier, we have our polluters. We have our internal teams. We have our external devs. We have our QA people. And we want to be able to identify them and then filter them out. I'm not interested in those people. They're just polluting the system. And then we have a genuine prospect, and we flag that. And then once they've made a purchase on a subscription site, and you'll see we have a classic, standard, VIP, have they upgraded, have they downgraded, have they gone to premium? And because we're capturing a user ID at the same time, our client is now able to go through any one time and see what was the time delay between people upgrading and downgrading, and cross-matching that with all the other additional data that we've been capturing.
It's both a temporal model and a customer status one, because we're also using 1 month, 2 month, 3 month status flags alongside this. So we know how long they've been a customer for and what type of customer they are when they're on the website. And we know that inside the analytics data. It becomes incredibly useful at that point.
So up here, we've got 5 different groups of how you can enrich your data. So we start off with the basics, the interactions, the clicks, the swipes, the types. Just somebody copy and paste. Then we talk about time on site, but not just time on site. Did we talk about, did somebody snooze at some point? Did they go off and do something else? Did they disappear and come back? We've got some clients who actually record how long did somebody record an article because they're tracking the scroll time.
So if you're looking at time on site, it's a terrible metric, right? Because what happens if somebody has 50 tabs open and they don't look at that one at all for minutes or hours? Well, you're recording them as being active on the site when they're not. So you may have these tabs open. People may not even be interacting with the content. So unless they're scrolling with their finger or with the wheel mouse or with the scroll bar, you don't actually know that anything is happening there. So without some kind of tuning of, to come up with a reading time as opposed to, average time on site, those out-of-the-box metrics are very, very flawed, right? But by tuning those or improving them, you can actually get them to tell you really useful things about customer behavior. So how long did they actually spend reading our articles is far more interesting than how long did they have a tab open on our site.
So what are we actually tracking to track both our short-term goals and our long-term goals? And short-term goals, it's really down to you how you define them. But short-term goal can be something as, did somebody subscribe? Did they like? Did they print? Longer-term goals are your long-term goals, purchases, customer acquisition. And then finally, how are you going to integrate some of that qualitative data that you may have? Session replay, voice of customer, chat windows. Now, we've got a couple of clients whose aim is to track every single clickable interaction on the site. One client that's doing really successfully at the moment is M&M Direct, who have taken every single from the click, export it into BigQuery, and have built a propensity model to see exactly which sequence of clicks is most likely to get a sale. Now, that's taken a lot of time and effort to do, but they've been really successful at it. So, in summary, it's essentially, are you capturing all the key information? That's the really point. What key information do you need to know to analyze that journey? Maximize the use of your analytics tool to store all that additional information. You'll be glad you did it in a year's time. Craig loves to talk about a love note. Essentially, it's a love note to yourself. Think about what you need to capture every short and long-term customer reach, and just investigate how easy is it to actually integrate that data into your system.
Thank you, Charles. Automation. This is a very interesting one. Charles and I sometimes have conversations where we say, wait a minute, this is the 3rd time I've done this. This is stupid. Why don't we automate it, right? And we wish the other companies would have that kind of challenge going on, where you're saying, I've seen situations where people say, well, so what do you do with that data to make the report every month? Oh, well, I get data from Bob and I get data from Jane, and then we put them into PowerPoint, and then I pull this data, and then he runs me that report, and then I make these 3 slides, and then we send it off to this guy who puts his figures in, and then we give it to the CEO. And the conversation we had was, well, we can automate that all for you. And they were like, what? Like, so we don't have to spend 5 hours a freaking week building this? Right? But nobody ever asked them, how long do you spend building these slides for the management meeting, right?
I mean, I think we should point out, Craig, when we do an audit, the first thing I do is I've got 10 different reports I set running. I go make a cup of coffee and I come back and we've got that hard work. Yeah. And people say, well, why do you do that? Well, you now do exactly what I'm doing in your analytics system. Log in, click download, and they go, oh, I get this now. Yeah, that's why you automate stuff.
Yes, that's why. Here's a simple rule. If it takes longer than 15 minutes a week and you're doing it regularly, automate it. Make the pain of later repeat on this go away, And the problem often is that we don't know how much time is wasted here, because if you think about it, we go and do all this user research, right, on external customers, and we do usability testing and we ask questions. But do you ever ask anyone internally how well they're getting on with the analytics system? Have you ever done a user test to see how a marketing manager uses Google Analytics to do their job? That has never happened. I'm the only person that I'm aware of that's done a user-centered analytics design. But it makes it successful, because what you're concentrating on is not throwing tools at them or reports. You're actually concentrating on figuring out what it is they're trying to do with their job, and then enabling the tool to cut that pain and angst out of their ability to get quickly to that insight or get that data.
In fact, I'd do it. Next time you need to run a report, take your mobile phone out, set the stopwatch going, and just calculate how much time you're actually doing it.
Please,
and I think you'll be unpleasantly surprised.
And if you follow this kind of trail of the data, not just what you're doing, but how other people are using the tools to assemble things within your company, you'll find this report monkey wastage, right? And this report monkey stuff is where people use analysts to run reports. That's a real waste of their time, right? Because you should be running the report yourself, or the people who are using Google Analytics should have a report that they can run. You shouldn't be going to an analyst to run you data, because that will make them very unhappy. It's not a way of making them productive, and it means that you're just sucking productivity out of the entire company. It's a great way to waste all your analytics resource. So automation is about removing manual reporting tasks that are a pain, making it a one-click setup, automatically emailed to people, or some dynamic piece of content that updates as soon as somebody looks at it and interacts with it. You know, you can also, once you've done this, rather than actually just giving people this data that they ask for every time, you can have a little bit of pushback and iteration with them, saying, is this really the stuff that you need? How about if we put this in, right? So instead of spending time on pulling the report, once you automate it, you can spend time talking to the person about how to improve the report. And suddenly the world's a better place and birds are cheeping.
We want to talk about the art of the possible.
Yes, the art of the possible.
People sometimes say automation is just pulling a table down. No, it's not. It's sometimes taking it and transforming that data. And sometimes people are not even aware that was possible. And you say, well, what do you normally do? Well, I filter it and then I take the top 10. Well, would you like me to do that for you? And people go, oh, I hadn't realized it was that simple.
If you've got a situation where 40% of your analyst time is running stuff every week for everybody within the company, then you're in a terrible state. And we've seen that. You actually need to over-resource your analytics team to make this work. That's like counterintuitive, right? We actually need an extra person to help dig us out of the hole that we've made for ourselves over the last 2 years. The problem is, it won't actually save any time. You won't think, oh, we'll have loads of spare time in the analytics team, because nature abhors a vacuum and everyone will jump in and use up that resource. But the thing that you won't notice here is it changes the productivity game. Those analytics people are far more productive now. So if you invest structurally in automating away the problems, it helps the analytics team and all of the stakeholders that they currently supply. And there are many different methods of pulling this data. We didn't want to get specific, but there are various ways. You can do SQL extracts. You can pull stuff into Excel or into Google Sheets. And there are many tools that will actually provide you a nice front end onto your back end analytics data that aren't the analytics tool themselves. Then you have the automatic reporting inside your analytics. If you have enough analyst time, they could go and set up an automatic report so that that person doesn't come and ask them for it every week. Imagine that. It's amazing. I normally go and walk to the analyst desk every week and ask them for a report, but now it appears in my inbox and I don't have to interrupt them. So things like dashboards and emailed reports, all of these will help you cut out work, you know, and fend off all these useless report monkey requests. These are some of my favorite models. These are ones that Charles and I run in a lot of sites. But I'm just going to give you one example of where automation really slays things here. And what this is it's called the dimensional grid pool. So imagine if you're pulling a load of key stats from a site like traffic, behavior, you know, e-commerce, sales, and funnel stuff, right? What if you said to yourself, actually, what we need is a funnel for iPhone models or Android models, or we'd like to see our funnel for different countries or Mac browsers. How do you do that? That's not normally in the analytics packages, or it's quite hard to get hold of. So we've built some tools to do this kind of massive dimensionalization of the data inside your analytics system. This is for Google Analytics. And what the kind of stuff that we uncovered here, this one little difference down here for the tablet conversion led us to start 1 hour of work that nailed a $2 million a month loss. $2 million a month for a travel company. It's a lot of money. And no one called them up. What it was is you couldn't book a return trip on a tablet. You could only book the outward leg of the journey, and the button broke on the return journey. No customers had called up, right? But the data told us that there was something wrong, and if we hadn't split the funnel in that way, we wouldn't have figured it out. This is another example here of a dimensional grid pool that helped us dig into that data, and what we saw was the problem was tablets. The problem was early on in the journey. So what we did is we focused on the 3 early journey pages until we found the bug, and then they fixed it. They didn't get 2 million back a month because customers were just pissed off and went and used a different device. They did it when they got home on their desktop or on their mobile. But the point was is they'd got most of it back. They got 800 grand a month back. That's a nice amount of money. I wish I was on commission. There we go. So if you're interested in building multi-dimensional grids, all the stuff is there. And when it comes to automating models and data integration, sorry, no time to, these slides will be available afterwards. There's a slide link at the end of the deck as well. Take a photo of that. And they're already available online. You can download them right now if you want. So, and we'll make sure that we circulate them afterwards too on Twitter. So all of the stuff that you need to build multi-dimensional grids are there. But there's even a tool that will do it, which is called Profit Grid. So have a look at that one too. app.profitgrid.io. So if you want to do this kind of stuff yourself, you don't need to be a developer or a coder. I don't code anymore, but I can do all of this stuff without
I can't code full stop.
No.
So these tools have been a godsend for me.
So there is stuff for Google Sheets, there is stuff for pulling data out of Google Analytics, and there are some additional tools here that will allow you to integrate Analytics Edge is your favorite tool, isn't it?
It certainly is.
It's awesome. It's bristling with more options than a porcupine.
You know, there's one thing we've forgotten to mention here. And Craig and I have a concept called data noodling. And data noodling is spending time playing with data. And the reason I mention it
interrupting you
is because we can get to data quicker.
Yeah.
And one of the things we discovered, taking some GA data, Google Analytics has a viewport size and a browser size. And we went, hang on, there's quite a few Chrome versions where the browser size and the viewport size are exactly the same. And these turned out to be a headerless bot that the devs were using to test the site. That was 3% of the site traffic. Now, this was a multi-million-pound site, so the IT department got a bit of a slap. But we wouldn't have discovered that if we'd had to do the extracts itself. It just gave us the time to, we call it noodling or playing around with data. It's going and finding stuff.
Consider for yourself, how much time do you just get to sit and play with data and have fun with it and look at it and think, what if and why is that? And that's interesting. If you don't have much of that time, then it means there's something wrong. Because play should be involved in data. Serendipitous noodling with data is one of the best ways that we actually find stuff that's useful. There's a few more tools that are on here. There's even integrating things with R, and there's some useful stuff from Simo on there. But if you're going to hire someone or work with a team to actually really push your whole automation side here, these are some of the core skills that you'll need. I'm not going to go through all of those, but there are some really good benefits come out of this, because when you get people to automate stuff, it forces them to understand the data model. It forces them to understand how the data collection works and what the biases are and how the metrics are actually composed. So there's a whole load of stuff flows out of just doing this work of saying we want to automate time-consuming tasks away. But people should have these kind of skills. If you're going to hire someone to do automation for you, they need all the stuff, all the things on this list. It's very, very important. And Charles and I also do automated models on, for very large e-commerce sites, and we've got a stack of stuff like this. We can just run these and tell you stuff about your site, and then we can customize them from there. But they're out of the box. It's kind of like, oh look, here's one I cooked earlier, right? It's a serving suggestion. So to save money here, you have to spend money. 1 hour of automation work means you save next week, the month after, the year after that. You've cut a whole load of useless waste out of the rest of your life for the rest of the year. But it increases data literacy, but you don't need to know how to code or do SQL queries. If you can use Excel, you can automate stuff. And please restructure your analytics work around removing these duplicates. Identify what the most time-consuming stuff is. Ask the analysts. They'll say, it's you guys coming and asking for reports, at the end of the month, on the Friday before the management meeting. And you should really have, instead of 90% report monkey and 10% thinking time, it should be 90% thinking time and 10% report monkey. Make it that way. Charles.
Thank you, Craig. So, once we've collected the data, we've cleaned it, we've automated it, now we've actually got to analyze it and present it. Now, what is the point in doing all that hard work when it looks like this? Pretty, but completely unintelligible, probably even to yourself. So, we ask 3 questions when you're presenting data to anybody. Can people clearly see the surfaced, and really importantly, what is the actionable issue? What is the one thing I want you to do? So do people know what actions they can and should take? And 3, we see this time and time again. What does your presented data cause your audience to think? Because if you're not labeling stuff properly or making it as clear as absolutely possible, they're going to walk away with a different action from the one you wanted them to take. So I'm going to give you an example of where data was sent that produced a really high cognitive load. So an e-commerce client came to us and said, oh, we have our suspicions. What do you mean your suspicions? We don't think this really expensive search tool that we've implemented is actually working as effective as it should. What do you mean by that? Or we're not quite sure. It just doesn't feel. There was a feeling, a gut feeling. So it turns out the person responsible for managing this tool also had 4 other on-site tools to manage at the same time. So data was presented as a table that contained thousands upon thousands of rows. There you go. There's your report. Get on and manage. And we called this the completely useless search report.
Yep.
So they got the search term, they got the number of queries per week.
What would you do when you look at this?
But to be fair to them, the analytics team had actually said how many results were shown for each different query that was returned. And by default, it was a grid. They showed 15. So anything less than 15 would indicate there's an issue. So for example, there was only 3 sum addresses on average shown. And when there's 0, that means we have no stock in. But we said to the person, well, what do you do with this? Well, they went, I start at the top and I work my way down. And we were like, well, what about the long tail? Don't have time. I've just got to get this done. So we did a bit of automation. And when we're talking with 10, 15,000 queries a week, we built a taxonomy for them. So what we said, every search query had to go into a particular cluster or type. And then we laid it out so they could see really easily what was actually happening. So the most important thing they wanted to deal with each week was what searches are failing. So you see, there's a hyperlink that would take them directly to all their failed searches. We did a color coding system that basically said, if the searches have gone up, it's a green arrow. If they've gone down, it's a red arrow. And then we color coded the red for the failed ones to basically go, by the way, guys, you're getting a lot more failed searches than this last week or last year. And then he said, oh, it would be really useful if we could have the type of clothes and the materials. And then the merchandiser said, oh, what would be really useful is, can you show us all the low stock ones? Because we built out that taxonomy, we were really simple to say to the merchandisers, here's all the queries where you're returning really low stock. So either go and get some more, or let's deprioritize that in the search results.
But the important thing is all this information is not based around what we want to shout or tell people. It's based around what the needs of the merchandising team were, and then re-engineering the report to respect that need.
And the person was like, wow, was this all here? We've had, yeah, it just required a bit of time and effort, and actually asking you, how would you like the information? What would be useful for you to do your job quicker? Yep. She then said, can you do the work on the other 4 tools? And we were like, well, let's see what we can get out of there first. OK, so in summary, find out what jobs people actually do, and then figure the information they do their jobs. I would also say you need to ask them as well, because sometimes people know, and they'll say, oh, I've been asking this for ages, and people have always said, it's a bit too difficult, just get on with it. Don't assume that everybody needs to know everything. How many times have we all seen the weekly website report? That is 31 tabs. I don't need to see the 31 tabs, I need to see the tab that relates to me. When you deliver some information, the insight should jump out at you along with a follow-up question or a concrete action. And I'm going to do 2 things. I can highly recommend to go away and watch this How to Present to Get Results by Leah Picker. It's 126 slides. It's the best presentation I've ever seen on presentations. And there's a fantastic book called Storytelling with Data, which is a really good business case example of how to take data and present it really well.
Thank you, Charles. Data ownership is weak. I alluded to this yesterday. Do these kind of things sound familiar? Have you ever had reports that look at this like an old, dry, stale biscuit for the mind? Lovely. I just so look forward to looking at our monthly reports, but they lack relevance, they have generic suggestions, they don't ever change, there's no actionable insights or data that are presented. It's the same stuff every month, and you become, it's like banner blindness, it's monthly report blindness, same stuff again, ignore. So you need something that's going to work a lot better there. But you know, then we have this kind of ownership problem gnawing away, which is people put ugly hacks like, oh my God, we're putting a new funnel live, quick, get some tracking on there. It's done as the last minute. It's business critical, yet there's no kind of data layer thinking or cross-silo thinking about how to do analytics within the business. And like I mentioned yesterday, that leads to a disconnect between fixing the funnel tracking and getting the new funnel out. Massive problem for you. They're part and parcel of the same work, right? And people see this stuff as, oh, we'll do the analytics later, the guys will sort that out, we don't need to worry about that now. You do need to worry about that now. And people just shrug and give up there. But this is the problem. These are symptoms of data being treated as a project outcome. Like, oh, magically data will appear. You know, but you have to earn it. You have to put the work in to get the data out the other end. And if you want to know how to make this stuff work in an agile environment, these 2 presentations will tell you everything you need to know. And I think for anyone who's doing agile, they can look at this, and this will start to explain, this is what we need to do, because analytics, you know, basically developed features should not impede measurement, right? They're trackable. It's got tracking attributes, and the feature is actually linked to a piece of data work or a data layer object, right? So you can't say your tasks are done unless you've got the analytics bit done as well. It's not an afterthought. It's actually interleaved into the whole development process itself.
I would say we're very happy when clients ring us up and say, do you know what? We were actually, the analytics team was in on the ground floor. For once, we were developing a feature and somebody said, how are we going to measure this? Not as an afterthought, we built it, now how do you track it? Yeah.
But sometimes it is an afterthought, that is the problem. Complicated area, but absolutely vital. Training and investment. Again, I mentioned this yesterday. You know, there's a lot of people that I see not using Google Analytics. I say, can you use Google Analytics? And they say, yes, I use Google Analytics every week. And I say, what's that thing down there? Oh, I have no idea, I don't use that. And you think, so you don't know what the things are. But I get a lot of people say to me, we don't want to train people, because as soon as we train them, they leave. And I say, that's because you're working in a really shit place, right? It's not anything to do with the analytics training. And actually, there are ways of getting around this. We do a lot of hiring of juniors who have a lot of potential and then skill them up. And those people become very loyal because they have a lot of time and investment put into them, right? If you treat people well and also invest in them, then they will get fulfillment, satisfaction, and mastery out of their job, right? And as long as you're not then making that all go down the toilet by what their overall job is like, then they should stay with you. The problem is that if it's a shit place to work, getting 7 grand at another company looks like a step up because you're saying, well, it's still as shit as the place I'm at right now, but I get 7 grand more, right, a year? But the whole point is if you then trade against, well, I could go and get 7 grand more a year, but that job there is not as good as the one I have right now. And that's far more of a loyalty draw. So don't buy into this thing of not training people. What you need to do is fire the rubbish ones and train the good ones. Train your team so they get better at their jobs through using data. You know, so that they can know how all the options in the analytics package works. Oh yeah, I know how that works, I know how that filter works, I know how that reporting things works. You get more data out with less work, and you get more time to do data noodling. If you're not spending half your time scratching your head about how you get the monthly report figures out in 2 hours' time, then you'll have more time to figure out really insightful things about the business. Oh my God, this could change our lives. But you don't get time to do that without the automation. And it's about the Swiss Army knives. So there's another point about investment in your analytics tools. Get an audit. One recommendation I can make here is put more than 5% of your development time and analytics budget on top onto extending, right? So if you spent £1 million on an analytics tool, spend 50 grand at least on extending it and improving it and training people. And also put more time into things like data collection, fixing stuff, automation, enrichment, and improving your tracking tools, right? But you should try and validate this stuff. If you're not doing some form of user research or interviews or listening to and talking with the people that actually use Google Analytics to do their jobs as opposed to us, we're analysts, right? But what about a merchandiser? Do we know how they use Google Analytics? Can they use it? Is it working for them? Does it help them? Do they trust it? We don't know any of these answers unless we actually go and ask them. But it's like writing a love note to yourself. It's like saying, hey Craig, all we are is dust in the wind, dude. You're like my future self. So I had to tell you, I thought it would be most excellent to give you clean data. So I fixed like all the things. And you've got like 3 months of clean stuff and reports like totally make sense now. Whoa. Love you, dude.
I'm just trying to gauge, Craig, how many people know who these two are? Oh, yeah, that's what we thought, yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad at all, yeah.
They're coming back now. I can start to use all my old Bill and Ted jokes again.
Most excellent.
And that's the summary on investment and training. Add 5 to 10% to your budget on top. Otherwise, you spend £1 million in a tool and nothing on making sure that people can use it. And if you want to ask us about hiring tips and stuff like that, I know people are really interested. Ask us in questions.
We have one fantastic question that we always ask to see who is a really, really good analyst and who can actually think through a problem. Come and ask us.
We do screening for companies. Within 10 to 12 minutes, I can filter out almost all of the bullshitters that are applying for your analytics jobs. And I have 10 questions.
Craig calls them bullshitters. I call them report monkeys. And they're the people who go, what did you actually do? Oh, I ran a report. So you didn't actually analyse?
No.
10
minutes is all it needs. 10, 12 minutes will expose critical thinking and their abilities as analysts. And that means you don't then need to interview them or employ them for 3 years whilst regretting all those choices that you made. Interviewing is expensive time for you as a hiring manager, so why don't you make it go away by not inviting assholes in the first place? That's good. I'm your filter. I'll get rid of them, don't worry.
Good cop, bad cop.
Good cop, bad cop. So today has been a bit about, you know, the dark side and the good side, where we've kind of come from, the problems that we're trying to deal with, but also the sunny uplands of where we want to go. This one diagram for me represents where your analytics configuration should be going. And if you've just got the plain vanilla tag, you don't have any of this stuff. Think how brilliant it would be if you were tracking most or all of this stuff actually inside your analytics, and it will transform it. Someone will come later and ask for data. Old Mother Hubbard, the data's not there, right? So try and just get all the data and instrument all the things, and you have to do that through investment and some of the other things that we explained to you. So, you know, rather than doing a long, boring, like yada, yada, data, do all these things kind of summary, we thought we'll just end here and we'll give you this grid and ask you for any additional questions. Thank you for your time today. Sure. We have time for one question. Any questions? Yes, sir. Good catch.
Could you tell us that interview question?
Yes, I'll tell you what the interview question is go away and tell me what is the most popular height in a desktop browser.
Yep.
That's it. Because I want to see the person's thinking. Because in an analytics package, it's not obvious. And if somebody just shows me the top 10, that's not good enough. What I'm essentially looking for is how does somebody query that long tail?
I'll publish a slide with 3 really good interview questions. One of them is about definitions, right? So if you ask people what's a hit, a page view, a session, and a user, right? So pick some basic definitions, right? And you will be surprised how many people come in, fantastic looking CVs, all these qualifications, been on all these courses, and the bullshit keeps going, right? So I start them on, define a user to me. Well, it could be a person, and then it's someone that comes to the site, and it depends if you have cross-tracking. And you're just like, no, you're just tripping yourself up on this explanation. So I've had people 60, 70, 80, 90,000 pounds a year looking for that in terms of salary, and they can't answer basic questions about how data is collected on websites using JavaScript. Come on. You know, and yet I'll have someone else in the same hiring pool who will be looking for 38,000 who will give me a perfect definition of it because they know, they understand it, it's imprinted on their brain. And there's some very simple questions like that that you can ask, you know. A good trick one to ask is someone comes at 11:55, puts an item in their basket and checks out at 12:05 the next morning. Which day gets the sale? And people will tie themselves up in knots trying to answer that in a really complicated way. And the answer is, what does the business do? Right? It's not about a technical thing. They'll give you a super technical answer. And the bullshitters are the ones who spend 20 minutes answering that question.
Right, and to wrap it up,
I'll send you the stuff.
Essentially, what we're looking for is curiosity.
Yeah.
We want a curious mind. And I will take anybody who is curious and doesn't have the necessary experience
and
over
train them up.
A so-called experienced person who can't answer the question.
Hope that was useful.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you know who we need to thank? We need to thank the 50 people in Belgium who are watching this on the live stream. Hello, Belgium.
Hello, Belgium. Thank you.